So, the movie Straw came out sometime last month, starring a few faces you might have seen before: Tiana Taylor, Taraji P. Henson, Sherry Shepherd, and even. Wait a minute. Is that Sinbad? It sure is. Huh. But anyway, this was the first Tyler Perry related film that I have reviewed on this channel since the 688, which I thought was just okay, but I like the historical element and the story they chose to highlight. But when it came to Straw, I overheard my parents watching it one day and I thought it looked pretty interesting, so I decided to give it a chance. So we meet our protagonist of the film, Janiyah Wilkinson, who's a single mom living in a pretty rundown apartment with her daughter Aria, who also suffers from seizures. She wakes up to loud music from her annoying neighbors and gets Aria up and ready for school while she's asking for lunch money that Janiyah doesn't really have. She's struggling to even pay the rent for the apartment, which the landlord is eagerly awaiting as she threatens to put her and Aria out. So she gets Aria to school but notices that the principal, I think, is staring at her. So she leaves and goes to work. She's a cashier at a grocery store where her boss could pretty much care less about his employees and their safety because he gets angry at Janiyah for the customers' crazy reactions. Her coworker tries to offer her some money for Aria's medication, but she refuses to accept, then gets a call from Aria's school telling her to come. Her boss is angry about her having to leave, but she gets him to give her a few minutes to get to the school, where she finds what looks like CPS workers taking Aria away, mainly because they wanted to investigate her bruises, even though it was from her slipping in the shower because she's ill, she has seizures. So she ends up leaving the school and runs into an off-duty cop with anger issues who wants to exact his revenge on her because she tried to get into another lane while he was trying to speed past. Yeah, so he's running over all these cones trying to get to her and run her off the road, and then another officer comes over to talk to her, telling her that she'll have to give up her car. Obviously, this makes getting back to work a lot harder, but when she does, her boss is pissed because she went overtime and he just fires her right on the spot. He doesn't accept any explanation. He's just like, yeah, you're done. So she goes back to her apartment and finds all of her stuff out in the rain. She promised her landlord in the beginning that she was going to be back on her break with the rent money, and she didn't make the deadline. So there's a whole lot of unnecessary screaming that doesn't really solve the problem, but doesn't seem to make her feel better either. But it's a pretty classic case of overacting, in my opinion. And then we cut to Janiyah back at the grocery store pleading with her boss to give her her last check, but he refuses, telling her it'll be in the mail in a few days. Right then, two men come in, and one of them tries to casually start a conversation with Janiyah and even calls her name, but it really is just because he read her name tag. Then they try to rob the place, and the main guy wanted Janiyah to put all the funds into her daughter's bag with her medication. So she fights with him, refusing to give up the bag because she knows her daughter is going to need what's in the bag and it's very expensive. So she eventually gets her hand on the gun, takes him out, and his accomplice just pretty much runs off and abandons him. Her boss somehow comes to the conclusion that she's involved somehow because the guy saw her name, and she decides to take him out too because at that point he was just trifling. The investigators, including Detective Raymond, comes in to assess the crime scene and also question Janiyah's co-worker, who makes it pretty clear that she wouldn't do this and this is completely out of character for her. So I didn't get to mention, Janiyah actually took her check off her boss's desk after she took him out too. So she took her check over to the bank where she's now trying to cash it, but doesn't have her ID, so the teller hands her back the check, and Janiyah decides, you know what, I'm gonna take this gun that I have out, and you're gonna give me this money. And both the tellers start freaking out, with one of them triggering the silent alarm, and the manager, Nicole, she calls the police and describes Janiyah to the team, but it's crazy that this entire time Janiyah has a gun out that she's confused as to why the tellers are freaking out. Like, are you for real? Anyway, so Nicole tells the security guard what's going on, and then she tries to defuse the situation. The cops arrive outside, including the cop that tried to run Janiyah off the road earlier, and Detective Raymond, who ends up taking lead on talking with Janiyah. So it turns into a full hostage situation, with Janiyah having a rant or two trying to blow off some steam, and she doesn't want to come out once she sees that that crazy cop was out there waiting on her from earlier, and he threatened her life at the time. So she was like, yeah, I'm not going outside so you could take me out too. I'm not doing that. So yeah, basically she just stays inside the bank. They now also think that she has a bomb in her daughter's backpack. But we're going to get to that later. We're going to revisit that. So Janiyah ends up letting a few hostages out, except for one old lady who she eventually gets a chair for her to sit down in. So after seeing this from the cameras, Detective Raymond now thinks, or is convinced, that there has to be a peaceful way to get the hostages and Janiyah out alive. Janiyah retells her whole day of unfortunate events to Detective Raymond, and it ends up getting broadcasted live through one of the teller's phones, so now she had most of the community's support. However, she's still a murder suspect. It doesn't really change that. So the cop's hands are pretty much tied here, but the detective is getting a little too attached, and her team members kind of notice that too. Nicole and the old lady that's being kept in the bank, they're empathizing with Janiyah and her situation, but on the outside, the FBI was now getting involved and wanted to do things there without the detective, aka Detective Raymond. So eventually they allow the old lady to come out because she had low blood sugar, and Nicole makes it clear that she was getting back inside to see everything through. They still think Janiyah has a bomb, but it turns out to just be Arya's science project. Once Janiyah makes it clear that she's not coming out of that bank until that cop leaves, the one who threatened her earlier, Detective Raymond was like, you know what, I'm gonna make a deal with you. I'm gonna get this cop removed, and she does, and she also gets him suspended. And eventually all of this comes to an end when everyone is released, but they're just waiting on Janiyah to come outside. And that's when she has a conversation with Nicole saying, hey, could you like watch over my daughter while I'm in prison? But then she gets a call from her mother telling her that her daughter Arya had actually died the night before. And this whole day, she was experiencing pretty much a psychotic break, imagining her daughter was still alive, but she was really just talking to herself this whole time. It's a really traumatic and sad moment, but it seems as though Nicole already knew, even though Janiyah had been asking her to watch over Arya, like I said already, when she got taken to prison. But Nicole was pretty much just playing along to not cause any problems. And eventually Janiyah is arrested and taken away, and the movie pretty much ends there. They don't really expand on her story, what happened, nothing. But here are my official thoughts. So overall, I thought it was actually a pretty solid film. Although there were some themes in it that I think Tyler had done over and over again, like the black single mom trope that's just struggling with everything in life, I still like what he was trying to create here. As if he wants to transport you into something outside of what he's created thus far. But there are obviously a few areas that I would tweak just a little bit, such as Janiyah's role. Even though I love Taraji, I just personally feel like, number one, she's getting a little too old for these roles. And number two, she really needs to stop finding her way back into this typecast box. Like, I feel like she just keeps getting casted in this like similar character over and over again. But I think the only times I've really seen her shine was in Hidden Figures, to be honest. Like, yeah, she's had a few roles here and there where she didn't play a struggling black woman or a struggling single mom, but even still, it didn't really showcase her acting chops as much as I feel like they could be. Because I feel like she has a lot to offer, but it's just, yeah. Color Purple was just all wrong, okay? They knew she wasn't a singer. Why was she even in that? Anyhow, it ended up getting wrecked at the box office. But let's get back on track here. I would have casted someone else for the role of Janiyah. I also would have extended her story a little more beyond just the one day. Even though it was a very eventful day, they had flashbacks of her in the hospital with Arya, and the ones where it was clear that she had passed away. But that came like shortly after she got the call from her mom to confirm, like, hey, she's been gone. Here's to confirm, right? But however, I feel like the movie could have started with a prolonged flashback and then cut to the scene of Janiyah in her apartment, just to give a little bit more like oomph to the story. But I did really like the ending. It was something that made you, as the viewer, question everything that you came to know about the characters and their stories, or at least Janiyah's story, I should say. And also because everything happened within 24 hours, I do think that the pacing was just a little too fast and back to back when it came to everything that happened to Janiyah all in that one day. But I do get that it was probably done on purpose to really drive the point home of all of this being the straw that broke the camel's back, or in this case, Janiyah's back, or it being her last straw, hence the name. But I felt like this was a step in the right direction in terms of the writing itself. Not great yet, but getting there. It was still a little too stereotypical in some areas, but overall pretty solid in my opinion. But of course, you guys can let me know if you disagree with that. So those are just my thoughts. I thought, like I said already, it is a pretty solid film, and I think it was actually a pretty good watch. It wasn't entirely cringy, you know, like there were some cringe moments, but yeah, it was still pretty good. There was certain sprinkles of overacting, and you know, the writing was kind of, you know, but I think that this was a step in the right direction. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I will catch you guys in the next one.